All right. Good morning, evening, and/or afternoon. My name is Stephen Klontz. I'm one of the members of the PreTeXt community, and I'm here to show you the new PreTeXt-CLI 2.0. This is the new authoring interface, new update, major update that Oscar Levin, the maintainer of the PreTeXt-CLI, put out just a couple of days ago, I think, or rather 2.0 has been out for a couple of weeks, but we've been doing a couple of tweaks on the back end, and we're now ready for the big splash and the big push to get experienced authors such as yourself upgraded to 2.0. How do we do that? And is it necessary? And what the heck's going on? So what I'm going to do in this video is take, this is just the version of a book that was produced from the 1.7. So not the latest and greatest, just a random version of PreTeXt before 2.0. And I'm going to upgrade it to 2.0 for you and talk a little bit about what's changed and why we made these changes and how hopefully that'll help you be more productive as a PreTeXt author. So first things first, what you see here on my shared screen, this is a GitHub Codespace. This is how I am able to write PreTeXt completely within my web browser using a virtual machine that installs all the PreTeXt software for me on GitHub. Now, this is completely optional. If you like to install everything locally, you could do it yourself the way you've been doing it with your own local terminal. You don't have to do it through your web browser. You can install everything on your own computer still. That has not changed. However, we do have this thing called a dev container that I'll be showing you here in a little bit that automatically will install the right software for you and get you up and running. So if you're interested in doing this, the other advantage, of course, that I would encourage you to consider using the Codespaces environment, especially if you normally work in an environment that has consistent internet access, because you are working on a cloud machine when you use Codespaces. If that is you and you want to try it out, go to if you're already pushing your book to GitHub, you can author by just going to the code tab of your GitHub, and you see this green button. It'll say open. If you click on the Codespaces tab, it'll say open in Codespace. And I've already done that. So if I refresh, now you'll see that I have this randomly named scaling sniffle Codespace. That's the name of my cloud machine that is installed all the PreTeXt software for me, manages all that for me. It kind of gives me this sort of like overleaf style experience if you're familiar with using overleaf to write LaTeX. So it's something you might want to try out someday if you haven't had a chance to. I'm going to use it today, but you can always do all these same steps by installing everything locally on your own computer as well. So let me go back over here. So however you want to author, whether it's in a Codespace on your local machine, here is the files of a PreTeXt project. This is 1.1.7, and I've got a terminal pulled up as well. And so whether you're on a Codespace or whether you're locally, the first thing we want to do is get the latest and greatest version of PreTeXt, and that's going to require a pip install. That's either Python m pip or Python 3 m pip or pip 3. Or if you're on a Codespace, you can just write pip install. And I want to do upgrade, --upgrade PreTeXt. And this is going to tell the machine that I want the latest and greatest version of PreTeXt. And if I do that, then it uninstalled PreTeXt 1.7, and it successfully installed PreTeXt 2.0.2 is the latest version. Okay. So now that I have PreTeXt 2.0.2, I'm going to do one more thing to get this ready for the newest version of PreTeXt. I'm going to write PreTeXt init-r or --refresh. And by doing this, you're going to see a bunch of new files pop up. And I'm going to go through each of these and explain why they are here, what they're doing for you, and what you want to change or not change about each of these. So I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. The first file is devcontainer.json. Now, this is a file you only care about if you're using GitHub Codespaces or a similar containerized version of your requirements. So if you're installing everything locally, you're managing that on your computer, you don't care about this file at all. except for if you want other people to be able to use Codespaces to edit a fork of your book, something like that, then you might want to maintain this. But in older versions of PreTeXt, you may have a folder called .dev container that would probably be up here above the .vs code folder, which you may or may not have. If you have that old folder .dev container just by itself, you should delete that. We no longer use the .dev container folder. We have a .dev container.json, just a single file. And if you have both, it will be messy. So you should delete the .dev container folder. Now, here we have this magic line right here, managed automatically by PreTeXt authoring tools. This is an important line of this file. It shows up in all of these generated files that we kind of go through here. They all have the same line as a comment. And that is a magic line. If you don't care about .devcontainer.json, I encourage you not to delete it, but definitely keep this line at the top, because if you don't care about this file, it either means you're not using it or you expect us to handle it magically for you, then you should go ahead and keep that line there. However, I do care about my devcontainer.json because I've found, and I think this is something we hope to improve in future versions, is that the PreTeXt small image does not install quite as many dependencies as we really want it to, even for simple projects. So hopefully this will change in the near future and you don't have to manage this. This is a good example of something that I typically change anyway. I want to manage this file manually, so I'm going to delete that whole line. All right. And that means that it will no longer overwrite this file for me in the future. The reason I want to change this is because I like to comment out the PreTeXt small, even though it installs more stuff. I want it to be the full installation of PreTeXt. And that's going to get me, for example, I want to be able to generate Sage plots. And so I need to have this full version of PreTeXt. There are some other things down the line. I don't think it's really anything I need to mess with too much. So, but I am going to go ahead and manage this dev container JSON automatically because I want to not have the default settings for that particular file. Okay. Let me go ahead and pause the, well, before I do that, let me show you if you are using Codespaces. If not, you can skip this. But if you are using Codespaces, at this point, you should do a rebuild container, and I'm not sure what the difference is, so I'll just do a full rebuild container. This is going to recreate that Codespace with the full installation of all the PreTeXt files. So I'm going to go ahead and do this full rebuild, and I'm going to pause the recording and come back when that's done. But you'll see it'll get the green button here, rebuilding, and this is going to take about 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to pause and come back when that building container is finished. All right, and we're back. I also had the thought to zoom in a little bit on my screen, so hopefully you can read things a little bit better. Notice that we now have it looks pretty much the same, but it did reinstall the software I was using in my particular code space to give me the full version of tech, give me Sage Math installed automatically. This is how I like to operate. It does take a bit more of my space. You are limited in how much space you can have in your code space, but if you're only working with maybe 1 or 2 projects at a time, it's not usually a big deal. But that's enough about devcontainer.json. So I deleted that file. Now let me go ahead and run again PreTeXt init refresh just to show you that if I were to run that again, so notice it says it changed the dev container. I thought I was managing that manually. Well, I am. It got backed up. So that this is a new feature of PreTeXt, is that even if you are managing these files yourself, you don't want the default dev container, you don't want the default gitignore. Whenever you run the init refresh, if you just want new versions of the files that come with a new version of PreTeXt, it is your responsibility to compare before and after what it is, what these things look like. And so I'll show you a nice way of doing that here in a moment. When I'll do that at the end, if hopefully I remember. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and say that I knew I wanted to keep this original dev container JSON that I was working with. So I delete that, I'll rename the back file. This is the original dev container JSON. I want to keep that as it is. So I don't need to mess with that. Okay, gitignore. Gitignore, you kind of see it looks a little bit different before and after here. The gitignore is just a file that tells Git, which you're probably using to get your project up on GitHub, which files are important to store on Git versus which files are not. Again, I'm going to delete this backup because I'm going to use the automatically managed. And so if in the future PreTeXt or PreTeXt-CLI produces new types of files that are useful for authoring but don't need to be stored by Git and don't need to be shared with the public, then I can let the Git CLI keep that updated for me. Codechat config.yaml, that's another one of these files that you may or may not have noticed being produced by recent versions of PreTeXt. I'm going to show off why this is a good reason why, maybe I should have led with that, why you want to upgrade to 2.0. I'm going to delete the old version, the backup version, because I want to use the manage automatically, the new updated version of Codechat config. I'll get back to projects. That's the one that's had the biggest change. The other nice thing is that now the requirements.txt file knows that I upgraded from 1.7.0 to 2.02, but because I'm now using that, it's being managed automatically. That's going to help me remember that what I'm authoring with, what I'm sharing with the world, and telling the world the version of PreTeXt that I'm using matches what I'm actually using. So I'm going to delete that backup, and I'm going to have requirements.txt tell the world that I'm using PreTeXt version 2.0.2. Finally, the biggest difference in files that we have here is the project.ptx and the project.ptx.back. If you look at these, you're going to see they look very different. Let me get rid of this terminal for now, because I want to compare the new project.ptx with the backup version. And so this is what project files look like in 1 point whatever versions of PreTeXt-CLI. Here's what they look like. You can see they are a lot smaller, a lot more succinct. And that is definitely by design. We wanted to have a much more simplified experience for defining what the targets are. And like everything else, especially when you're first getting started, although if you're watching this, you probably have a mature product that you're transitioning, you may have a bunch of different targets that you're using with different publication files. I want to explain to you how you can make that change and that upgrade. But notice that it's a lot simpler. The basic project file, ignoring these comments, it's only about 7 lines long. And this is what we used to produce for everybody. This was just the default output that I got when I ran PreTeXt new on 1.7, which has like 50 lines. And so we really wanted this to be a much more simple file to maintain for authors. And so let me use this point to kind of show you how can I, if I'm using, especially if I'm using VS Code, how can I see exactly what stuff has changed? And that's where I can use the source control button. And I can go to project.ptx. I'm going to go ahead and delete the backup file, because even with that gone, even if I had some custom targets, I can still, if I haven't committed yet, which I haven't, I can still click this project.ptx working tree. And now you can kind of see the old version of the project file on the left and the new version on the right. And you can kind of see how things have changed from one to the other. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and make this line up, explain what's changed, and I'm going to make this line up or show you some different common changes that people might be making. So first things first, notice that we do have the magic comment up here. So this means that if you just want to have 3 targets, a web target, which is the HTML format, a print target that makes your PDF, and a print LaTeX target that gives you the LaTeX that produces your PDF. That's what we have by default in 2.0.2. And if that's good enough for you, you don't have a bunch of publication files, you don't have a bunch of different source files, you don't have a bunch of custom settings, you can just let this just work. And this is something that I'm really excited about, because it means that folks that just want to start writing the PreTeXt don't have to learn what a target is, don't have to learn what any of this stuff is. They can just start writing their PreTeXt. So, you probably have a mature product if you're watching this video. How do I translate this stuff? Well, notice that one of the big changes is that we used to have a bunch of different elements. A target had a name, but it also had a format element and a source element and a publication element and an output dir element. And all those things had to actually be specified. Notice that now by default, all your target needs is two things. Every target just has to have two things to work in PTX version 2 project files. Every target needs a name and it needs a format. By default, we give you a target called web, and its format is HTML. We give you a target named print. Its format is PDF. And we give you a target named print LaTeX, and its format is LaTeX. You don't have to tell it where the source is, because starting in version 2.0, we assume that your source lives at source/main.ptx unless you tell us otherwise. So if you did want to specify that, let me go back, let me just go back to this is helpful if you're kind of going back and forth. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the project.ptx file by itself here. So notice that I can also put these on new lines if I want. If that helps your readability, you can do that. And if I want to customize where the source lives, maybe it doesn't live at main.ptx, maybe it lives at book.ptx. Well, you could do that. Just tell it the source is book.ptx. Notice that I just changed the name of the file from main to book. That's because if I want to actually change the name of source to like something else like src, where I would change that information would be on the targets overall. Overall for targets, the source is living in src. That's an overall setting for all of my targets. The source files live in src, and the source is at book.ptx. At this point, I'm recording this live, so if I make a mistake, I want to catch it and fix it for y'all live. Also, I want to show off the new authoring workflow for PreTeXt books, and that is a little something called Codechat. If you're not familiar with what Codechat is, now if you go to View and you use Codechat, again, this is something unique for VS Code users. It's set up for you automatically in the Codespaces environment. And now I'm going to pause and do that, see what I messed up here. And I'm back. Let me tell you what I did wrong. So first things first, I forgot the new rule of PreTeXt 2.0. So ignore that for now. We're not viewing a file we're supposed to be viewing. I edited my project PTX, but I kept that line that said managed automatically by PreTeXt. I did not remove that. And because I did not remove that, if that line is in there, I'm not sure if I'm going to remember how to spell it by hand, manage automatically by PreTeXt authoring tools. I believe that's the magic. Yeah, as soon as I did that, if that line is in your file, it will always get overwritten every time PreTeXt runs. So we have to be careful. If we do want to customize our project PTX, which most people watching this video do want to do not include that line. Get rid of that entire line. And now you're able to do the customization. So for example, my customization, the other mistake I made is that it's not the targets that gets this, but it's the project, where you can define where the source of your project lives. And that's going to be at src, because that's the customization I made as I changed from source to src. And then for all of my targets, it's not main.ptx. My source file is book.ptx. And I'm going to change that for all three of my targets. Finally, the Codechat it looks like it's erroring out. Well, that's just because I'm editing a file that I can't preview with Codechat. But if I go back over to book.ptx, then now we're going to get this kind of beautiful overleaf style experience where you author your source on the left, you see what it looks like on the right. And importantly, if it's not my great book, it's my greater book. All I have to do is type that, wait a second or two, and it updates my book. Very quick turnaround. This is going to be really useful, especially for new authors, but even for experienced authors. This instant or near instant feedback for you to see exactly what it is you want to write and see it reflected in the output of your book, I think is going to be a game changer. And I'm really excited to share this with folks. Now, just like you always could, there is support for multiple files. And in fact, this is something that's going to be important for the code chat, because I go in here, if I want to change this chapter title, I want to change this section title, I could do that to call this migrate section. You already see that it's rebuilding and updating, but I lost my place in migrate section. This is why it's going to be very important for you to keep up with your XML IDs and to partition out your files into separate files. At least until future versions of hopefully the code chat will eventually be able to just tell that you're working in that particular session because that's where your cursor is. But for now, you really want to make separate files. I'm going to call this great section.ptx. And then if you have just your great section here, don't forget that boilerplate XML question mark thing. It's always good to have that at the top of your file. You need to have an XML ID, and it still can't show you because I have to do one more thing. I have to actually XI include it. So XI include, oops, autocomplete for me. href is at great section.ptx. And now it's all happy. I don't see the errors. And if I go over to my great section now, I actually am on the right section. Hello world. Here's a math equation. Uh-oh, it didn't work. Why didn't that work? You just try to build it in the middle of me typing. That happens sometimes. So if you just want to resave, or you just want to put like a space in there, that'll trigger the rebuild. And if it tries, like if I stop too long and I hit save, you see it's broken right now. I gotta close that up, and then if I let it rebuild, sometimes it gets out of sync. So you just gotta fix that. But it's really handy for authoring. And again, another game changer. I'm gonna potentially embarrass myself with my lack of TXT knowledge. I'm gonna try to do a LaTeX image, and I'm gonna draw a circle. Hopefully, I cross my fingers that I know how to do my TXTs. And that's not working, so I'm going to pause the video again, fix that source for me. I figured it out. Circles, the diameter goes in parentheses, not curly brackets. So you notice that circle's there, right? Well, what if I want it to be a smaller circle? Well, it's blowing it up to the full width, so you have to take my word for it. Let me put two circles on the screen to kind of emphasize. Here we are. And so now we have this workflow for authoring diagrams. It's going to be very snappy, very, very quick. You can edit it in your code. And then if I want this to be a circle that's half the size, not 1/5 of the size, all I have to do is change its diameter from 1/5 to 1/2. And PreTeXt-CLI authoring tools are going to update this for me. Again, this is a VS Code code chat. Codespaces is not necessary, but it's the easiest way to get all this up and running for you. You can have, again, I'm trying to convince you, consider using these new tools that Oscar and Brian Jones, got to shout him out as well. He's the maintainer of Codechat. It's going to make your life a whole bunch easier for writing PreTeXt in 2023. All right, well, we've got some support now for LaTeX images. You can do sage plots very similarly. We do our best to build things, and only the things that you're actually editing are we building. It does do some caching. So notice that if I change this formula to b plus y squared equals z squared and save that, it's going to be much quicker to do that than if I add in another circle and rebuild that. It's going to take it a beat longer. Not too much. It's probably hard to tell right now because it's a very simple image. But running LaTeX is harder than building PreTeXt just by itself. And so we only rebuild these LaTeX images. We only do the sage plots when there's actually changes made to them, at least with all the default settings that I'm encouraging you to use. Okay, so there we have it. We've got some examples of updating our project.ptx to use customize. We have to get rid of that code chat thing. It doesn't know what to do if you're looking at the project manifest right now. But that's the sample of how to like change where files live if you don't do the default, which is source/main. And in that case, if that's what you kept, that's what we produce by default, then things just work. Where's your output going? And we don't specify where your output lives. Well, that's just because we assume that if your target's named web, then you want your output to be at /web. Codechat is all automatically building things from based upon which section of the book you're actually editing. And that's the other nice thing is if you have this huge pretext book, as long as you're viewing just that one section, that one file, like here at greatsection.ptx, you're not rebuilding the book every time that you edit that page. Like even if I have a huge book, let me just throw in like a bunch of chapters and sections. Let me pause and do that. I'm resuming the recording just for a moment. I've gone through and I've edited this document to have like a few dozen chapters. Like I don't even know how many chapters I've thrown in here. Every chapter has like a dozen sections in it as well. So like I'm trying to show you guys what a huge book looks like. And every section has a separate image. And that's what's taking a long time right now to build. And I'm showing you this because I want to show you how quickly you can still edit an individual section, even if your book is huge with hundreds of diagrams, hundreds of figures, and they're all using TXT. So I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 chapters, each with like a dozen sections. Each section has a different TXT image. And building all those images the first time is going to take a while. It's like 100 pictures, right? But I'm going to show you in a moment that when I'm editing a single section, my life is just getting a lot easier in PreTeXt 2.0. So I'll be right back when that full build is done so I can show it off to you. Oh, wait, maybe it's done right now. I'm still going to pause. Be right back. Okay, and I'm back. So again, I want to show you how great it is that even though I'm now going to go view with Codechat, and we get this preview of my book, and if I navigate, you can see I have looks like 13 sections and what I say earlier, 15, 16, 17, 18. Oh my goodness, apparently have 19 chapters and 13 sections in each chapter. Each one of these has its own TXT image. Okay, this is a huge pain. I'm gonna go back to the first section, the one that I actually am editing. I just want to point out to you, that's a huge book. That took probably about 2 or 3 minutes to build with all those images. But in PreTeXt 2.0, with all the cool VS Code plugins and PreTeXt tools, and again, shout outs to Oscar Levin, who maintains PreTeXt tools plugin for VS Code, and it's all integrated in this Codespace stuff that I'm recommending for you all these days. But I want to say hi, Mom, just for that one. I just want to hit that one section. It should take a long time, should it? It doesn't, because of the new tools are smart and know exactly what it is you're actually editing. All these other sections still just have the old information on it. But if I want to say hi, Dad, instead, PreTeXt is smart enough to know you're just editing that one section, and it just shows you to change that one section. And if I want to make this I think it's color green. We're going to find out if I remember that TXT bit. There it is. There's my green circle. It only rebuilt that one image, and it knew just to rebuild that one image, not the hundreds of other images that were out there. And so it turns this process of like 2 or 3 minutes into just a few seconds. So this is really the way that you want to split up your book into different files per section. So you can edit just that one file. You can just see that one section being updated. And then at the end of the day, what you need to actually build your entire book, right? You don't want to accidentally have edited some files and the others, and then it's building for you along the way, but we want to make sure there's a good, clean build before we actually share it with the world. Well, if you're using VS Code, you go to the PreTeXt tool and you just go to build web. And again, it took it a few moments, but it's not too bad because all those figures have been, what do you call it? The diagrams aren't being rebuilt. We know that those have not changed. We are rebuilding all the other stuff from source. You can see it spinning here. And if you don't use VS Code, this is the exact same thing as if going into your terminal and typing PreTeXt build web. It's the exact same thing. And again, if you're using the cool VS Code tools, it'll just tell you how to view your output. Now, if you use Codechat to view your output for your basic, oh, I just realized something. I may not have the most up-to-date version of, oh, I do. That worked. Okay, here we are. I don't recommend live preview. I thought we got rid of that. So use pretext view command to view the entire book at once. So this way you can actually navigate around. It won't refresh on you. You can see here that one section that I actually updated, Hello World. It's all here, my front matter, chapter and sections. So I can see this preview in a full-fledged browser and take a look at my entire web version of my book and make sure I'm happy with it. All right. What else can I do here? Well, again, you can give the right pretext build print. Or if you like to use the clicky buttony sorts of things, you could go to pretext, build another target. You can just click that button to build your print version. And I want to see what that looks like. I want to view, with the view command, my print. And again, it just shows me, now it shows me the folder that it lives in. So I'll actually click the PDF and then I can see that book with all my hundreds of sections and my beautiful green circle and hi dad. And here's all the other sections you can kind of see. It's all been built for me. Let's see here. What else do I need to show you? Well, at the end of the day, I made a bunch of changes. So as always, I want to share these changes with the world. I'm going to go ahead and commit these. And again, you can either use your git commands on the terminal, or you can use the source control if you're a VS Code user like I am. You can see exactly which files have been edited. I'm going to make a commit message that says upgrade to PreTeXt 2.0. And I like to commit and sync or commit and push, however you like to get your stuff up onto the internet. And now that I'm in PreTeXt 2.0, especially with Codespaces and Codechat, a lot of things are just going to get managed for me automatically. My gitignore file, that I don't have to mess with anymore as long as I trust the maintainers of the PreTeXt authoring tools to ignore and show the right files. That gets updated automatically. This Codechat config thing gets managed automatically. But my project, I did do some customizations, so I got rid of that automatic management. But if I was happy with things living in source, and I was happy with my basic file being at main.ptx, then I could just delete that and do another pretext init refresh. This is the thing that you do every time you upgrade, is do a pretext init refresh. And you can kind of see that it got me back the project PTX is now managed automatically. And if I go to main.ptx, I should be able to see what this looks like. Again, that's a big book now. So the main file has to build the entire book for me. It'll be quicker if I go over to great section.ptx, and then it'll just build that one little bit of it for me. But it might be stuck building that big. I clicked the big file first by mistake. So it's trying to rebuild the whole thing right now. Oops. But here we have it. Now we have there we go. That's that one section, my great custom section, because that's the one I've actually been updating. Go. And again, dev container, it's managed automatically. It got rewritten. Because it wrote it with the small, I didn't want that. So I'm going to delete that. Or here's another trick. If you like to use get stuff, I can revert, discard the changes. The dev container.json. And now I'll have that custom version that I wanted, right? So remember, whenever you use pretext init refresh, you want to double check these configuration files and make sure they are actually modified the way you wanted. And I did want to modify this to use the default settings, so I made that decision. But generally speaking, that most of the time you're either maintaining it or you're not. So just make sure that everything you're managing manually, pretext init refresh. Anything that you're handling, like a dev container.json that's custom, just make sure that if you want that old version that's not managed automatically, delete the one it created and return your backup to its original file name, which you can use using git, or you can do manually like I did just then. But here at the end of the day, I've moved my source into source. I'm now using the managed PreTeXt authoring tools, and I'm going to commit using managed project.ptx. So if I ever decide to add another target, I was going to make sure I get rid of that line that says it's allowed to be managed automatically. So commit and sync. And there we have it. Folks, if you take away anything from today's discussion, I hope you took away this bit right here, where if you make the upgrade to 2.0, and especially if you're using VS Code, and especially if you're using Codespaces, so that we know that everything's installed for you, we can make sure you have the right software installed, is that we're getting pretty darn close to this overleaf style experience that you can just type and wait, and it shows you your edits, and it's going to give you really nice feedback that you're writing good pretext that looks good on the web, and it's not too much longer to do a build for another target like your print target. And then when you're happy with that, a whole other video, if you want to deploy this into your GitHub pages, it's really easy to share that with the world. But here's my book.pdf or my main.pdf. By default, it uses the name of the file, which is now main.ptx. Now it's main.pdf. But there you have it. I think that's all I have for today, folks. Hopefully this was helpful. And if not, let me know so I can record a better one. But thank you for being a part of the PreTeXt community. I hope this helps you get your project updated to 2.0. And I look forward to helping other folks in the community get productive with writing great, accessible, and interactive documents with PreTeXt. Have a great day.